Hi everyone, and welcome to session 2 of this free short course titled TikTok Marketing. This session is titled TikTok Targeting, and I'm joined by Alfie from the MediaWorks team. Alfie, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at MediaWorks?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Alfie. I've been working at MediaWorks for about 2 years now in the paid social department. So my official job title is a paid social and video executive. I work across a range of channels from LinkedIn, Facebook, and obviously TikTok as well.
So in terms of the clients that you work with as well, kind of what do they range from?
So anything really, obviously a lot of B2B on LinkedIn. We do a lot of e-com clients as well. So we've worked with the likes of Metro Bank, Cath Kidston, June. So it really does range. I think on TikTok, we have a lot of e-com clients at the moment. So that is the kind of main basis or client structure that we have. So yeah, very much lower funnel driven results on TikTok for us at the moment.
Because I know that we touched on this on session 1 as well, and we were kind of getting an introduction to TikTok, but a big one is for a lot of kind of digital marketers, business people, is they have this idea that TikTok is very much just about one type of user, one type of audience, and therefore perhaps one type of business as well, that not every business can use TikTok. Now, the reason I'm asking you that question is I think it's quite interesting from your perspective then, working within paid. So what's your take on that? Do you feel as though it's only for one type of business, or could anyone be using TikTok?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair point, and it's a common kind of conception that a lot of brands do have about TikTok. I think at a time that was the case, purely because of the sort of the Gen Z demographic being the main kind of taker of TikTok, and that only really applying to a handful of brands and a handful of business types. Whereas now what we're starting to see, which is really interesting, is the average user of TikTok is growing with the platform, right? So we're seeing what was once a Gen Z user kind of grow up a bit, which means that a lot of other brands become applicable to that user and they kind of fall into that pool of demographics. So whilst I think it may be a certain amount of time before we kind of see it being a lot more all-encompassing, like the likes of Meta, where you can really start to broaden out that age range and those demographics, I think there are kind of glimmers of other businesses being able to use it. So we have seen some B2B on there, a lot of lead gen based activity as well start to do really well. So yeah, I think it's a time thing ultimately.
So I guess, we've got a few objectives for this session. And one of the first ones is the key differences in using TikTok. So this is really from the digital marketer's perspective, the key differences in using TikTok organically versus in the paid sense. So I guess that's kind of a really open-ended question, but a nice place to start would be the type of content that we use organically. Is that going to be different from what we use from a paid perspective, or do we have crossover instances? Yeah,
so it's a really interesting one. And I think something that's kind of native to TikTok is that your organic content can really start to intertwine with your paid content. In terms of formatting with paid, there's a lot more kind of options there. So you've got different optimizations and targeting methods, of course, but your ad formats can change and vary quite a lot. I think in terms of the content type and the way you distribute that to your audiences, they kind of fall under the same remit. So we tend to group them under 2 types. So we've got UGC content, which is your UGC, which is user generated content, and then PGC, which is professionally generated content. So 2 very kind of simple outlines of content. What we tend to find that from a PGC perspective and our PGC based activity, that can do very well from a remarketing perspective and more so paid. But what we really like to do, and you can really start to get some solid insight into your audience and engagement, is test your UGC content against your PGC content from both a paid and organic perspective. But 9 times out of 10, what you'll tend to find is that UGC, so the user generated stuff, is going to perform a lot better on organic, and then your PGC content is going to do much better on paid, purely because of the way that audiences tend to take that content. People are more used to seeing PGC content from a paid perspective. It's more advertisement-esque, I suppose you could say. So yeah, I think that's kind of the main basis of it, but being able to use both kind of and intertwine them, like I say, is really important for TikTok, just because advertising on TikTok, and when you see an ad on TikTok, it's very much blended into the feed. So it's almost camouflaged. When you see an ad on YouTube, it's at the start of a video or it interrupts your video, which sometimes for the worst as well. But on TikTok, it really does blend into the feed. So what a lot of advertisers do like to do is really kind of try and make that ad look like an organic post almost, to try and get that engagement up. So a very interesting one, and something that's worth keeping into consideration.
Yeah, I remember listening to the MediaWorks masterclasses. So there was a series about TikTok, and we'll provide the link for that as well for the learners on the short course. And And that kind of reminds me of one of the questions I had for you. And, we did touch on this within those masterclasses themselves, which was this idea of, actually using TikTok as a brand. So do we need to ensure that we are posting there organically and we have that solid presence on the platform to get the most out of paid? Or could we just use it exclusively for paid, predominantly for paid? So what does that split kind of look like?
Yeah. So I think we, from our current client base that we work with on TikTok, we do have a mixture of some that are really heavy on the organic side and some that are either completely against it or they just physically don't have the resource or time to be able to do it, which is absolutely fine. I think it helps a lot, if I'm honest with you. Organic can be the kind of one of the pros of organic is the scalability of it, right? You can do organic with a completely zero budget and make it completely free if you want to, especially on TikTok as well. But also you can scale that and you can really start to play with a massive budget on organic if that's your goal. So I think it always helps, and I would recommend that brands do try, if they have the resource and the time, to push on organic as much as they do on paid, just purely because you're almost getting 2 for 1 then. So when people click on your ad or they see your ad on paid, they can directly go through to your page off of that and then follow you organically as well. So it helps, but it's not a necessity, and it's not a sort of win-lose situation.
So something that's quite interesting then, as you've said that, I was just thinking, as a client or as a brand working with you guys, if you were to come and say, right, we need to go live with some paid campaigns on TikTok now, I already have a presence organically on TikTok. What do you guys need to be aware of then from a content perspective? What I mean by that is, so we've had conversations in other short calls, with Johnny, for example, from the MediaWorks team, working in the design team there, talking about how branding and consistency in branding is so important, etc. So for you to get the most out of a paid campaign, what do we need in terms of the assets?
So I think in terms of assets, it depends really. I know it's a long-winded answer, but it can really depend on kind of the goal that you're looking at. So from an awareness perspective, we tend to, the blanket term and the blanket kind of way we like to approach it is to have a mixture of everything, right? So, we talk about those PGC and UGC content types. We like to have a bit of both if we can from a paid side, purely because that's your first grounds for testing, right? So we can start to see how people are interacting with each content type and format, and then we can start to make tweaks and changes based on that. So we might find that from a remarketing perspective, as I said earlier, the PGC content works really well because people have already interacted with a UGC kind of video. But this can all change and that can all differ greatly. But I think in terms of recommendations for number of assets, kind of 3 to 5 per audience. And if you can tailor that to the audience, then that will make it a lot better as well. I wouldn't say it's as important as the likes of LinkedIn, where you really have to start to refine exactly who you're talking to because it's very industry focused, right? You can keep it a bit more broad, but 5 different content types, 5 different types of videos, potentially 3 of those you've used organically already. So one thing that's really important to understand about TikTok is that the likes of a boosted post, and I say that with inverted commas because it's not necessarily called a boosted post, it's a spark ad, is actually really usable on TikTok, and it's something that we actively promote quite a lot. Now, the reason we do that is because from an organic perspective, you're pushing a post out, so you're getting your organic traction, and then we can start to intertwine that, like I say, and push that out from a paid perspective, but it camouflages that advertisement so much that it feels really natural, and the interaction that you can see on that post is tenfold compared to a purely paid ad. So I think one of the key takeaways and key points to remember on TikTok is you do have to kind of have a bit more of an understanding of trying to camouflage those ads, I suppose you could say, and not make it look as much like an advertisement as every other channel. So yeah, I think in terms of content types, recommendation for assets, 3 to 5 per audience. It doesn't have to be audience specific. You don't have to directly address the audience based on what they're interested in. But I'd also recommend intertwining some of those organic posts in there as well.
So you made a bit of a comparison there between Spark ads and boosted posts.
Yeah.
So boosted posts is a reference to
Meta.
Right. So the reason why I wanted to kind of draw attention onto that was I think a lot of the learners that we'll have on the short course, they will be familiar with other kind of longest standing social media platforms like a Facebook. And so it's kind of nice to have that point of reference there for comparison to understand, right, well, this is what we see works well on TikTok more so than other platforms. This is what maybe doesn't work so well. So again, just purely from a paid perspective then, using TikTok for paid activity, typically, what do you see working quite well, and what do we kind of see not working so well? If you could kind of identify maybe 2 to 3 of each of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of channel specific and in comparison to the likes of Meta and YouTube, we tend to see TikTok as a much more awareness focused channel. The reason for that being is, I mean, there's a number of aspects, right? So we can start to compare it to the likes of YouTube. It's very much a creator centric channel. So it's all about entertainment and creators. Whereas you look at something like Meta and it's a kind of all in one solution, right? You've got shopping, you've got Facebook marketplace, you've got groups on there. It kind of ticks all the boxes of a social media platform, a forum in some instances, a marketplace, and then like an actual branded shop as well. So in terms of the content you push out and what you're probably going to get the most back from, in my opinion, would be awareness. And I think that's how they've kind of designed the platform a lot as well from a pay perspective. So your audiences are always going to be much bigger. So something we tend to see on TikTok that you won't see on Meta is that if your audience falls below 500,000, it's considered narrow, which is, you know, interesting. And at first you can kind of look at that and think, well, that is a bit of a weird one, because on Facebook you can really start to go a bit more granular than that. So I think that's the main standout kind of key difference. You can start to chase a lower funnel conversion, but another thing that I'd also say is really worth keeping in mind is that the consumer journey on TikTok is much more different to the likes of Meta, Facebook and Instagram. So let's look at it this way, right? So 50% of users that see your ad on Meta are likely browsing on their laptop, right? So that means that the likelihood of them staying engaged after clicking on your ad because it's opening a new tab and they're browsing the internet actively is much higher. If you pull someone off of a TikTok ad, and it also, because 100% of those are going to be on their phone, or at least 90 to 99, if you pull them off of the app and then it opens their Safari and they're on a website, the likelihood of them bouncing is tenfold, just because it's kind of a stick in the consumer journey, right? And if you're pulling them away from the app that they originally intended to go on from an entertainment perspective, then that can kind of start to spike some negative conceptions, I suppose you could say. So my opinion would be test it as an awareness channel first, and then start to delve into those kind of different optimizations as you go along.
Makes sense. I think it's quite nice as well for people who maybe haven't used paid previously on TikTok. A nice way to kind of just experiment with it as a platform to kind of get used to the tools and how it all runs, etc. Absolutely.
So some of the pros and drawbacks of paid versus organic, there's kind of a handful of each really. So I think we'll start with paid. We can kind of see 3 different pros here, and some that kind of apply to different paid channels as well. I think the first one, and one of the most important, is the guaranteed results aspect of it. So whilst it's not necessarily, it's the hard term to kind of jump around really, guaranteed results, but it is almost a pay to win model in some instances. You know, you're paying a fee to a channel and you're going to get results back. Whether, you know, whatever changes, you're always going to get results. Now, there are so many aspects that can kind of make that fluctuate and make that change. But ultimately, the bottom line is you're always going to get results because you are paying for it. That's as simple as that. I think the second, and one of the most important actually, is the refinable and the targetable aspects of it, right? So on organic, you can't actively segment your audiences. You can't choose who you're posting towards and pushing your content towards. Whereas on paid, what we can start to do is we can really start to refine that audience down. So if we only want to hit people between 18 and 25 who are interested in skincare, then we can do that. Whereas on organic, you don't have that option. And I think the third and kind of final point that's really worth going over is the optimization aspect. So very much similar to the audience aspect and the targetability, probably not a word, but targetable aspects of it. You can optimize towards different goals, right? So we can, if we want to push some content out to 18 to 25-year-olds interested in skincare, but we want them to purchase a bottle of our skincare product, then we can make sure that that campaign is optimizing and finding those people that are likely to purchase the product. Right. If we only want to get eyes on ads and we just want to just get in front of as many people as possible, then we can do that as well. We can just optimize towards what the goal that we want. So I think they're the 3 kind of main benefits, some of which apply to other channels as well, some of which don't. I think the drawbacks for paid, cost obviously is a big one. You know, ultimately, like we were saying earlier, organic can be free if you want it to be. And then second is the time and effort that has to go into it. So you do need to consistently kind of nurture and tend to those campaigns, because you can't just set a budget of £1,000 and leave it. That's not really how we'd like to do it, because what you need to be doing is consistently looking into those demographics. Okay, well, we're targeting people interested in skincare. But if the 18 to 20 bracket aren't converting, then we don't want to target them anymore. We want to start refining that audience and really starting to keep on top of it. I think from an organic side of things, the complete flip side, there's 3 pros that I'd kind of run over. Again, something that we mentioned earlier is the scalable cost aspect of it. So it can be free, it can be really high budget. Now, whether or not it's free or high budget doesn't necessarily guarantee those results, like I say. So that is a drawback. I think the second one is the interaction part of it. So this is really TikTok centric and a TikTok focused kind of a pro of organic, that community interaction between brands and consumers on TikTok is way higher than any other channel, and something that we've actually started to see take over the app quite a lot. I think you can kind of liken it to Twitter, right? So we see a lot of brands replying to their consumers on Twitter, and whether or not it's from a joking kind of way, or even if it's an FAQ aspect and they're just answering questions, it's very much heightened on TikTok. So we see that a lot, and that can be really good for your brand, especially from a brand perception point of view. That can be really positive. So something that you can't really do so much on paid. I think the third and final is the reactive element to it. So on paid, it's a slower process. So like I say, let's refer back to those 3 to 5 pieces of content. That's likely to run for 3 months, and we'll be good for 3 months on that, or 2 to 3 months. On organic side of things, you need to be posting really frequently on TikTok. So, we tend to look towards the 3 to 5 posts a day, if possible, if you've got the time, which is really, really aggressive compared to a lot of other channels. Now, is that a win or lose situation? Again, it's not black and white. Like if you're not posting 3 times a day, you're not going to not do well. But organically, TikTok can take that just because of the algorithm, the way it works, the way it's pushing it out to different audiences. But what comes with that that's a positive is the reactive element, right? So there's a lot of trends on TikTok. If you're really focusing on organic side of things, then you can start to jump on those trends and really start to use your brand and apply it to those trends, which we've seen work really well for a lot of brands. And then finally, those 2 drawbacks, I think, for organic, kind of the opposite of the pros for paid, no targeting options. So there is always the opportunity of, I guess, wasted views. So some people might see your content that you don't really want them to see your content. That might not be your main demographic. The other thing that's worth taking into consideration as well is on TikTok it's a global platform. So whilst the algorithm's really advanced in the sense that if you are a UK-based brand and you're pushing your content out in the UK, then it's likely to be 99% UK people that are seeing it. But there's no way to be able to block other countries. So you could end up pushing your content out in the wrong place if possible. The likelihood of that happening is very slim, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then no guaranteed metrics is the last kind of con I'd say for drawback, for organic. Just the sense that you can gauge your views and you can gauge how much people are actually interacting, but it's not cold, hard evidence, and you can't make those informed decisions as well as you can on paid. So yeah.
Good stuff. I think that's a nice way then to kind of segue into the key differences in actually distributing content from a paid perspective, because again, looking at some of the other platforms, before we get there actually, this is a question for you then, because you mentioned TikTok, you've mentioned Meta, we've done a little bit of comparison as well between those platforms and TikTok. Now, one of the factors that you mentioned there was cost, right? So again, what's the cost differences in running paid on TikTok versus maybe some of those other platforms?
Yeah, so it's a big one. It's one of the most expensive paid channels actually from a social perspective. So the minimum ad spend that you're looking towards on TikTok for each audience is £20 per day.
Right.
So it's actually the highest. It used to be LinkedIn, which was £8 a day. And then Meta sits, as one of the lowest. You can go as low as £1 a day if you need to. So it is expensive. Now, the benefits and the kind of flip side to that is the cost per 1,000 impressions, or the CPMs and the awareness metrics. This is why we kind of say it's a good awareness channel, is because that cost per 1,000 impression, or that cost per mil, is much lower. So they're historically incredibly low on TikTok because your audience size is so broad. Right. So that's something that's worth considering. You might be spending £20 a day on it, but you're getting much more results, or in some instances much better results than other channels from an awareness side of things.
So in terms of performance on TikTok, then working with the various clients that you have with their TikTok paid accounts, do you typically see that TikTok is worth the investment? Because as much as I appreciate, we can't necessarily offer that advice to learners on this short course, the thousands of learners accessing to say, TikTok's perfect for you from a paid perspective, go ahead and use it. Broadly speaking, do we see that the return is worth it?
It really depends, to be honest. So I think we've, on the whole, seen some really great success with it. I think any brands that are looking to use it, or anyone looking to use it in conjunction with other brands, start with awareness, like we've said before. Like I say, once you start to climb further down that funnel, we've seen it become quite hard to actually generate those conversions purely from that consumer journey perspective. So e-com brands, we've seen great success from a lower funnel perspective. Anything else, we kind of tend to try and start to dip our toes in the water from sort of traffic and our reach-based engagement content, because then that way we can kind of start to spend less, number one. But number two, what we're also getting is really valuable insight into engagement. So if people aren't engaging with the ads from a traffic perspective, then we know that if we start to push ourselves further down the funnel, we might not see the results that we're looking for. So in terms of return, like I know we speak about the age-old question of, well, if I'm running a reach campaign and I get 5 million impressions, what does that mean for my business? I think it's like any other paid social channel or any other kind of awareness activity. You start to have to look towards other avenues, right? So, I know we have advanced reporting at MediaWorks. We use, GA4 a lot, and we use we've just switched to GA4, I know. So what we tend to do is measure our direct traffic. So if we run an awareness campaign and we start to see that people are seeing their content, so let's say we do 2 million impressions across the space of, a month. And then what we'll start to do is measure the uplift in direct traffic. So people might have seen the ad, gone about their day, woken up the next day and thought, I'll tell you what, I'll type that in, and then gone on the website and then, sort of initiated a session that way. So that's one of the main effects that we tend to see from an awareness side of things. I'd say, anybody looking for a kind of measurability aspect and want to be able to present back to somebody, these are the results, or this is what it's had as an effect on your brand, then that's the way to go. I think, but sort of bottom line is, if you're thinking about testing it, then look to it from an awareness aspect, because that's where you're going to get the most kind of lucrative results comparatively to any other channel.
So do you think that is quite dissimilar to other social media platforms, perhaps? Or would you say there is a bit of you have seen that elsewhere as well?
Yeah, I think it's reminiscent of other channels like Meta, just purely because of the fact that, awareness campaigns, they're not easy to run by any means, but in terms of the kind of plug and play aspect, then you can really start to you can just push out to a broad audience if you need to. I mean, there are so many aspects where, if I did no targeting and decided to go for the whole of the UK, then my engagement rate is probably going to be quite low comparatively to if I'm actually being a bit more granular. But yeah, I think ultimately there are a lot of similarities. They're more heightened on TikTok though. So I think it's slightly more aggressive.
Right.
So, on Facebook, we might find, let's say our brand awareness campaign is doing really well. We start to see a bit of drop off for traffic for this specific audience. And then, we start to, in our conversion campaign for the same audience, we start to toy with the negative conception of an unprofitable campaign, let's say. So we start to see returns of just over the sort of minimum threshold for breaking even. On TikTok, think of it like that, but times it by 2. So, and it's not, I don't want that to scare anybody. I don't want it to be like, it's going to be unprofitable and it's going to be a waste of time. It's just, I think consumer conceptions or perceptions, on that app are a lot more aggressive. Like if you're interrupting someone's session, like I say, it refers back to that entertainment aspect. Facebook, a lot of people are actually on Facebook because they want to buy something. Because like I say, it's become an e-commerce platform as well as a forum and a group discussion page and everything in between. Whereas TikTok, people are on there because they're probably taking a bit of time out of their day to, I don't know, look at some funny videos of cats or whatever they want to do on the app. So, you are interrupting someone's session ultimately at the end of the day, and you do have to keep that into consideration.
To me, it almost sounds like there's a bigger risk, but potentially a bigger reward out of this as well. If you're willing to take that risk and invest into TikTok as a platform, having identified, who the user is on the other end, the type of content that's going to work with them, everything that we kind of discussed in the first session of this short course. But now looking to invest into it from a paid perspective, at least, because like you've rightly said, we can invest quite a lot into organic content itself, which has a whole nother conversation for kind of digital marketers as well to understand, is this the best place to place budget? But then certainly from a paid perspective as well, I think again, that kind of just amplifies that notion of, we need to really understand, what's going to tip the scales here in our favor of where's this money best placed.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So the question I was going to ask you before, I thought I'd be a bit cheeky to say, is TikTok even worth it? But I'm sure the learners would have had that question is. How do we actually run paid? The types of ads that we can run, or different ways that we can amplify our content to different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by saying if you've had experience with other paid channels, paid social, specifically like Meta, then you're in the clear. It is pretty much the same process, start to finish. So brands can have a business manager account, which is their kind of central hub for anything they need. So it can link to your organic pages directly. You can have your ads manager account in there and all of your other business information and assets as well. So very much similar to Meta in those lights. It's the exact same, in fact. In terms of campaign setup, again, very similar. I'm not going to keep making that comparison because I understand that some people watching might not have run paid on Meta, and that's absolutely fine. First you need your ads manager account. Obviously, if you're going to run ads, then that's what you need. Simple setup in terms of business information, anything in between, billing details. In terms of the campaign setup itself, you will start by creating your first campaign. You've got a list of optimizations, which is what we were referring to earlier. You can optimize towards different goals. So like I say, we've been mentioning awareness, traffic, etc. There's plenty of goals that you can choose from. So whatever's right for your brand or what you want to achieve is what you can then pick. That's your starting point from a setup point of view. There are a couple on TikTok that are native to the platform. So, they're native, but we wouldn't say they're native because we do have like engagement-based campaigns on Facebook or Meta, sorry. But you can kind of look for video view campaigns, so you can directly try and optimize towards as many views as possible, which is kind of similar to the awareness side of things and reach, but it's a little bit more engagement focused. But yeah, you'd move on then. Let's say for the sake of conversation, we decided to pick a reach campaign. So we're just trying to reach as many users as possible. You'll then move on to your ad set creation, which is your first audience that you're going to run your ads to. So there's a number of kind of targetable options. There's interests and behaviors. On TikTok, there's one big thing. I know we'll probably delve into this a bit deeper, but one of the bigger kind of aspects of targeting is comparatively to Meta again, and I'm going to start using that a lot, but it's not really interest-based so much. It's more the content types they're engaging with, because it's not, on Facebook, it's always been a case of like, so-and-so is interested or likes this page, which falls under this category, therefore we can target them because they fall under this bracket. Whereas TikTok, it's all about what content are they engaging with. So the interests and behaviors are slightly different to Meta, and they're a bit more broad, but nonetheless, they're always kind of the changing and there are additions. But there are a couple of other aspects that are worth noting that I think are really interesting on TikTok in terms of targeting. So something that we've seen, I think from day one, to be fair, which is a really interesting type of targeting, is we can target by operating system. So if someone's on iOS 14, 13, whatever iOS they're on, we can target them by that and only hit people who are on that operating system. You can target by phone type. So if they're on an iPhone or an Android. And then the really weird one is you can target by cellular data. So if someone's on 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, and then an even weirder one is that you can target by network provider. So we can target people that are only on Vodafone if we wanted to. So there's some kind of native targeting options.
And I know that this will be a question from learners as well, but what is the use of some of that?
Well, a phone provider company, there's a clear one there. Let's say I'm O2 and I want to run some ads, then I'm just going to target everybody from Vodafone. That's what I would do. It's a very competitive strategy, to say the least, but there are certain aspects. I think the Wi-Fi side of things, again, Wi-Fi providers, any network providers, Virgin Media, TalkTalk, you can start to really kind of play with it like that. But I think, on the broader scope, those targeting options probably won't be too useful for many people. I think if you did a bit of digging and really refine the audience, you could, but ultimately I'd recommend just sticking with the interests and behaviors. But yeah, after that, you'd then go on to create your first ad. So like we say, there's a lot of other formats. You can either link directly to your organic page and boost a post, or run it as a Spark ad, which is a boosted post on TikTok, or you can create your own ad as well. And there's a number of formats to choose from.
So again, just on that, because I'm aware that in these short courses and in these programs, we can quite easily make a lot of assumptions. Everyone understands the language that we're using. So a Spark ad then, because you mentioned that a few times, what is a Spark ad?
It's a boosted post, simple as that. So you know, on Meta or on Facebook, we tend to see a boosted post is something where you've pushed out an organic post on your page, and you can essentially start to put some spend behind it and run it like it's an ad. It will say sponsored underneath, and it will be a boosted post. People will know that. The reason for that and the kind of USP or the unique side of it is that you can, like I say, intertwine that activity of organic and paid. Essentially, you're killing two birds with one stone, right? So you've got the organic push, and then sometimes what people like to do is, once an organic post has started to lose traction a bit, you can kind of bring it back with a bit of spend behind it as a paid ad. So that is the exact same concept on TikTok. So let's say I post 4 videos across the week for my brand. 2 of them are UGC, 2 of them are PGC. And then I pick the one that's performed the best, but is starting to taper off, and I'll boost that and run it as a spark ad. And that would be a good strategy to kind of run with initially if you're running organic and paid. The other kind of formats are straight advertisements, so it will still look like a TikTok post, but it's just a fully paid version. It doesn't run on your organic page. And then you have shop-based ads as well, which are more e-com focused, so you can start to pull in a product feed. So when, you know, anyone that might have used TikTok before, you can see it, you can click on a button on the ad, and it will pull up essentially a replica or a mirrored version of your website on TikTok. So that's one of the aspects, to be fair, that I didn't get into earlier, but is a way to kind of mitigate that user journey problem that we were talking about from a lower funnel perspective. Migrate your website essentially to TikTok and run it on TikTok. But they're the 2 main formats.
Right, well, I think that covers all the bases for this session, and I know that you are joining us for a future session as well, the last session of the short course, in fact. But for now, at least, thank you very much, Alfie, and to all the learners as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.